GETTYBoris Johnson met the Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu at a NATO meeting in Brussels. In a keynote speech, the Foreign Secretary will make a robust defense of armed intervention by UK forces in the Middle East. British foreign policy is not the problem, it is part of the solution, he is expected to say. He will also say repressive regimes in the Middle East rather than Western intervention are to blame for the spread of extremism. And he will warn that poisonous Islamist ideology has become as addictive as crack cocaine. Related articles. New poll shows over half the UK blames EU for lack of Brexit progress. Trump is plunging the world into a fire with no end in sight. GETTYMr Johnson left 10 Downing Street following a cabinet meeting. British foreign policy is not the problem, it is part of the solution. Boris Johnson. Speaking to an audience in central London, the Foreign Secretary will say, "Every day around the world I can't tell you that British serving men and women are putting their lives at risk to roll up terrorist networks, to expose what they are doing, to thwart them and bring them to justice." They are making good on what the Prime Minister has rightly called the unconditional commitment of the British people to the security of our European friends, not just in this continent but beyond. In a wide-ranging speech, Mr. Johnson will say that repressive states breed terrorism, not Western foreign policy. He will argue that blaming Western intervention for the rise of Islamist extremism only encourages the spread of jihadi propaganda with the addictive power of crack cocaine. To assert, as people often do, that the terrorism we see on the streets of Britain and America is some kind of punishment for adventurism and folly in the Middle East is to ignore that these so-called punishments are visited on peoples, Swedes, Belgians, Finns or the Japanese hostages murdered by Daesh, Islamic State, with no such history in the region, Mr. Johnson will say. He is expected to conclude, "British foreign policy is not the problem, it is part of the solution. And above all we will win when we understand that we means not just us in the West but the hundreds of millions of Muslims around the world who share the same hopes and dreams, who have the same anxieties and goals for their families, who are equally engaged with the world and all its excitements and possibilities, who are equally determined to beat this plague." Related articles. Stanley Johnson net worth. Does Boris' dad have a huge sum? UK forced to give seat on World Court to India, after French ambush Boris in rebellion against fears may once soft Brexit.